Hello, sisters. I'm back for the second time. I forgot to press record, so Lenore asked me to come back and to share with you to get the video recording this time. And as I share with you what the Lord's been sharing with me. And let's go ahead and open prayer, because I think I'm a little nervouser. So let's open in prayer, please. Father, I thank you. Thank you that you settle us, God. I thank you for your peace. I thank you that there is nothing, God, that you cannot do. And so, Lord, I stand before you and I ask to lead me through this sharing, that it would be your words and by your Spirit, God, that I would only speak what you have prepared. Thank you for your peace, God. Thank you for your guiding Spirit. Thank you that this is you and not me. Thank you, Father. Thank you for this time. In your holy name, I pray that you lead us and that your will be done. Amen. So as I shared before, I'm not a teacher, by no means. And I'm learning. And so when Lenore asked me, I felt like the Lord was saying, just share what, how he's teaching me, right, and how he's showing me. So what I'm about to share is just a bit of that process, kind of jumbled, but I'll begin nonetheless. So in praying for this year's women's retreat, there was the usual sense of excitement, right, and anticipation. And this year was going to be different. We were heading to the mountain. And we were heading to the mountain to meet with God. I even remember sharing a devotional with Bing and my sister Cindy, talking about the Lord wanting to show us his glory. And it just seemed like everything was just lining up. In that devotional, the author wrote that one day while in prayer, the Lord began to speak to her saying, "You know plenty about my work in your heart and mind, but I'm going to work through you and show you my glory." The author then wrote, "Sister, you may know plenty about the inner work of God that takes place in the process, in the struggle, and in the valley, but I prophesy to you right now by the Spirit of God that your Father is about to show you something more." Yes, I thought, yeah, this is it. Just as Moses asked the Lord, please, show us your glory. Show us your glory, Lord. And as with past retreats, we knew that God would meet us there. And we were looking forward to hearing and experiencing all that he had planned for us. And we know by experience that God never disappoints. Then, unexpectedly, without any warning, we were quickly introduced to the coronavirus disease, and we found ourselves in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. With the shelter-in-place order and social distancing in place to help slow the spread of the disease, we had no choice but to postpone our retreat, sadly. Definitely not in our plans. But absolutely not a surprise to God. Here we were preparing, praying, planning, and sure, we're disappointed. We were looking with expectation and we're disappointed, but God already knew. He was preparing and planning. It's been busy. so nothing changed according to his plans. It's been busy for me at work. I work at a local medical center, and my days have been long, unfortunately, or at least initially, they were really long. And I'd come home, and we have a swing in the backyard. So I would just go outside, and I would just start swinging, not talking to anybody, just appreciating the quiet. And I would just sit back there quietly to myself. And then I started reflecting back. And I started thinking about all that we had prepared or prayed for, and what we were anticipating and planning for. And then a question came to mind, and I began to wonder, thinking that perhaps somehow we either misinterpreted what God had said or misunderstood what his plan was for us. So I just asked him, were we wrong? Were we wrong in thinking we were going to meet you at the mountaintop? And just as I said that, almost immediately his reply, or I heard him say, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. In that moment, I was quickly reminded that what the Lord has spoken will and does come to pass. So his plans for us never changed. Circumstances maybe, but his plan never changed. So I thought, okay, but I still didn't understand, what was the deal with the mountains? Why mountains? And that just kept coming to mind. So as any good father would say, he told me, go look it up. And so I did, slowly, because I had limited time, but I started to look. So initially, I looked up the term mountaintop experience. Okay, wait, what does that really mean? We always talk about mountaintop experiences, and we use that phrase. And then I was searching for instances where mountains were referenced in the Bible. And I had to laugh because you'll be interested to know that mountains are mentioned in the Bible almost 500 times. So I'm going to go through every one of them. Just kidding. Don't worry, I won't. But there's just a few places mentioned that you might recognize, so that I started looking at. So Mount Ararat is the mountain mentioned in Genesis 8, where Noah's ark landed or came to settle after the waters had receded. So after the flood came, 40 days, 40 nights, the waters receded, and that's where Noah settled, the ark settled. And then another one was Mount Moriah. In the Old Testament, Abraham was commanded to sacrifice his son. And that's it in Genesis 22. So in order to properly present the sacrifice, Abraham and Isaac ascended Mount Moriah, and it was on this mountain that God saw Abraham's faithfulness and rewarded him by sparing his son. Okay, and then on to Mount Sinai. So Mount Sinai is the mountain where we receive the 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy and Exodus. So the people of Israel had been delivered, but were in great need of structure and assurance. And so Moses went to the top of the mountain and talked with God. I say that flippantly, but that's where Moses talked to God. And he returned with the 10 Commandments. Mount Carmel is another mountain. In 1 Kings 18, we see a great spiritual victory won on Mount Carmel. It was on Mount Carmel where Elijah proves to the people that God is the one true God. He does this by calling down fire from heaven to ignite a water-soaked sacrifice. Doused, soaked. And after that, the drought that had besieged the land ended. And then Mount Olivet. Mount Olivet is mostly known as the Mount of Olives. It is one of the key places mentioned in the New Testament. It was a pivotal mountain in Jesus' life. It was the foot of the mountain that held the Garden of Gethsemane, where Christ prayed before his crucifixion. And it was also the mountain that saw his last days on earth. And then he ascended into heaven from the Mount of Olives. So just a holy place, I don't want to say ordained, but a specific place. So there's other mountains in the Bible, and they varied in size and shape and location, but they were places where people were brought one step closer to God. That's how I was taking it. Places where the gap between God and man was bridged for just the briefest moments. Once again, I hear God prompting me again. Stop looking at the mountain. What has taken place? So I go back and I take another look. And this time, reading about the events that took place before, during, after, I went back to some of these places. And in Genesis 22, 1 through 14, I read about Abraham, where he willingly attempted, at God's command, the unthinkable, sacrifice of his son Isaac. I think, wow. It was there that God's angel stopped his hand and provided a ram for sacrifice instead. And Moses, of course, he had fled to Midian after murdering the Egyptian he found beating a Hebrew slave. Even from the time that I shared this before to now, I went back and was reading about Moses, and there is so much there. So this is just a little synopsis of. So while he was tending, so he fled to Midian, and while he was tending his father-in-law's sheep on Mount Horeb, God spoke to him from a burning bush. Again, out of nowhere, there's this bush ablaze, revealing the most sacred name of Israel's God. I am, right? Yahweh. It was there that God told Moses that the outcry of the Israelites had reached him. And he had seen how the Egyptians were oppressing them. I moved on to Noah. So then I was reading about Noah. And so Genesis 6 to 9, the Bible tells us that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah walked with God. God told Noah what he was going to do and what Noah needed to do to prepare. Then came the rain, 40 days and 40 nights. And then after the flood waters receded, God brought Noah and the ark to settle on the mountain of Ararat. Noah offered God a sacrifice there. And God, the Creator, made a covenant with his people in that moment, promising that he would never bring such destruction against the world in that way again. And then verse 22 says, "Thus Noah did according to all that God commanded him. So he did." I'm going through again, looking at people, places, and circumstances, and I'm still not getting it. I'm still not quite sure what I'm looking for or what I think God is trying to show me. And then I'm reminded. And Psalm 121 comes to mind. It says, "I lift my eyes up to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither sleep nor slumber. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. So I went back again, but this time I was looking for the Lord. So I go back to Genesis, chapters 6 and 9, going back to Noah. Starting at verse 5, it reads, "Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." So every intent continually, without, just continue. And verse 8 says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." Noah, verse 9, Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. That sounded so familiar to what we're experiencing today. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. So the word corrupt caught my attention. And so I went to the dictionary, like I've watched or learned from Lenore. And I looked up the word corrupt. And there were several definitions. One was to change from good to bad in morals, manners, or actions. To degrade with unsound principles or moral values. To rot, to spoil. And then to subject a person to corruption of blood. To alter from the original or correct form or version. Kind of like the file was corrupt. But God had a plan for us from the beginning, and we changed. We became corrupt. God didn't change. We changed. Through our choices, our disobedience, our actions, our thoughts. In verse 13 it says, "And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. For the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth." God's speaking to Noah. He's sharing his heart with Noah. He's telling him his thoughts. And this tells me that Noah had a relationship with God and was spending time communing or in communion with God. God continues in verse 14 to tell Noah, "Make yourself an ark." So God is telling Noah what he needs to do. And then he goes on and he provides him with the specific instructions on how to do it. So in verse 15, he says, "And this is how you shall make it." So God gives Noah a warning of what is to come. In verse 17, he says, "I myself am bringing flood waters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die." But he also makes a promise to Noah. And he says, "I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you." And in verse 22, it says, "Thus Noah did according to all that God commanded him." So he did. And then in chapter 7, the Lord tells Noah when the appointed time comes. And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. And in verse 10, guess what happens? It comes to pass. Just as God said it would, it comes to pass. And in verse 11, that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So God didn't hold back, right? He didn't start with a little trickle. Oh, I'll just kind of start running the hose, right? No, he turned on the faucet and he let it go. He let it pour. In verses 18 to 20, it says, the waters prevailed and greatly increased on the earth. It says it 3 times. The waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. 3 times. He says the waters were coming. And where is Noah in all of this? It says that the waters increased and lifted up the ark. And it rose high above the earth. And the ark moved about on the surface of the waters. In verse 23, only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive. So can you picture it? The earth is being destroyed, completely covered with water. All that was on dry land died. And Noah and his family were safe, dry, and secure. And the shelter of God provided that God had provided for them. And there's a picture that comes to mind whenever I think of Noah and the flood. And our family doctor, when we were kids, had these books in the waiting room. And there were these blue Bible story books. And I could clearly, in fact, I tried to find a picture of it, but it showed that the sky was just dark and storming, and the rain is just pouring down. And the waves, they're just crashing up against the ark, right? And so when you're a little kid, that makes an impression, right? Obviously, I'm 52 years old, and I can't get that out of my head. But so maybe similar to what we're seeing and experiencing with what's happening today. Very turbulent times, right? Things that we never thought that we would see in our lifetime are happening. But I don't see anywhere in that scripture where it says Noah was afraid, or where he doubted or questioned God. In fact, I might have missed it, but I don't even see where it says that God told Noah what would happen after he was going to flood the earth. He just said, I'm going to do it. This is how you prepare. And Noah did it. So Noah listened to God and heeded his warning and did exactly as he said. But then, at God's command, the rain stopped and the waters continually receded. And this is where I got excited. In chapter 8, verses 3 and 4, at the end of the 150 days, the waters decreased. Then the ark rested or settled in the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. The ark settled here. The ark didn't settle here. The ark settled on a high place. I don't know if you've ever hiked up a tall mountain. Now, I'm not talking a little hill, a mountain. You may know or can imagine how difficult it is, or how taxing that can be. Well, last year I went to 6th grade camp with my youngest daughter, Ryan. And the teachers, before we left, the teachers and the parents that had gone before were trying to warn us. And they were saying, there's some difficult climbs. They're pretty tough. In fact, some of them called them or referred to them as heart attack hills. So I was a little fearful. I'm afraid, right? I'm not in shape. But I thought, if they did it, yeah. If they did it and they lived to tell about it, I'm going to do it for my daughter. I have to at least make an attempt. And with God's help, I'm going to survive. So one foot in front of the other, I'm going to do it. Well, it was a good thing that God was there, because we hiked, and not these simple little nature walks in the forest. We hiked all day, every day, for 4 days up these big mountains. Maybe it wasn't so difficult for an experienced hiker, but for me, it proved to be challenging. But I made it. We made it. I had bruises on my toes, but I made it. So going back to Noah, the interesting to me is that God used the rising waters, the increasing circumstances, to lift them there. No matter how much water came out from the earth, poured down from the sky, or how high the floodwaters grew, Noah and his family rose above it all. They might have been rocking and rolling inside that, as the waves were tossing about. I joked earlier that, I could picture these little chickens, like, scattering about, and everyone's just hanging on for dear life. And then as the waves came and the water around them moved about, but they were safe, secure, in the shelter that God provided for them. The ultimate shelter in place. And where is it that God took them? He took them to a high place. And what did it take to get them there? Noah having a relationship with God, listening to him and heeding to his instructions. Obedience. And actually doing what God said. And I thought, what if Noah had decided to take some shortcuts? He said, pitch, I don't need to put any pitch. That's going to take too much time. I don't have to, I could use 2 or 3 less beams. It'll be enough support, right? What would have happened? Can you imagine? When the flood came, all of a sudden, leaks everywhere, the pressure from the water, the being tossed about, the beams. There was a specific reason God told them to do it the way he did. But he did. He did exactly as God said. And when God says it, we can trust that it's solid. And he knows every part of the plan. He designed it specifically. And he's not keeping it a secret. He wants to share that with us. We have the same opportunity to make those same choices, to spend time with God daily. He's speaking, he is instructing, he's sharing his heart with us. Are we listening? Are we making the time to listen? Are we taking note and acting in obedience? So when that time comes, and it is coming, it may even be here now, we can know that we are sheltered in him. Will the circumstances of the world or events taking place affect us? Absolutely. Why would they not? we're smack dab in the middle. But just like Noah, in the middle of that sea of water, just like Daniel was in the lion's den, he didn't take them out. He didn't remove them. And I wrote, "Take heart, sisters." And I love that phrase. I love every time Lenore reminds us that, it reminds me of take heart. Heart meaning mind and thoughts. Remember, bring to mind all that God has said in his word. Take captive those thoughts, right? He's given us the power to do that. When you pass, so he brings to mind all that God has said in his word. So I was reminded of Isaiah 43:2, and that says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." How many times have we heard that? When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they'll not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. And as I was looking at different translations, the New Living Translation was worded like this. It says, "When you go through deep waters, I will be with you." God is saying this to us, to us. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you'll not drown. It will not overtake you. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. Years ago, I was faced with some challenges when I was younger, and a friend of mine sent me this scripture, sent me 2 Corinthians 4:8-10, and it's always encouraged me and has reminded me of what the truth is. And we're hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. It's not an easy process. I know that. I know that firsthand. It's not. And recently I was listening to Priscilla Shire on the radio, and she was talking about, she had said something about the difficulties we find ourselves in. And I love how she worded it. She said, so she was talking about difficulties, why are we going through this? And she said, so we will know what it feels like. So we have a testimony of what it feels like to have the presence of God covering us so comprehensively and so completely that we can emerge from the fiery furnace with not even smelling of smoke. It's like you be in that furnace and you come out smelling like a rose. But not even a hint of smoke. That is God's promise to us. And instead of looking at the circumstances, at the mountain before us, or the challenges that are ahead, we need to be looking for God. Just as he showed me, look for me, for God in all of this, and remembering what he said. My sisters, I've been meeting, my sisters and I have been meeting together to pray once a week, specifically for our children and our families. So we've committed to that, having that time together. And in that time, God has brought Psalm 91 to mind multiple times. And so he says in his word, whoever dwells, dwells, lives, abides in the shelter of the Most High, Most High, will rest, have peace, in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. So, going back to Noah. Noah remained in the ark for as long as God told him to. So we need to do the same. So we need to not hide or be fearful, but shelter in Him, take refuge until He instructs us to go forward or do otherwise. I clearly remember those blue story Bible pictures of the people outside of the boat. They're crying out to be saved. But when the floodwaters, I'm just picturing it. It just, you just see them reaching, right? Reaching, calling out. And when the floodwaters came, it was too late. The appointed time had come, and God closed up the ark. The people were left to experience the consequences of their choices. And similar to the 10 virgins that Lenore's been teaching us about, the 5 foolish virgins did not prepare or do as they were advised. And they too ended up being too late and left out. So I'm seeing, spend time with God. Spend time with the Lord. Abide in Him, and He will shelter us from life's storms. Just a random thought. I had wondered, do you think Noah ever even considered jumping out of the ark into the water? Dumb, right? I don't think so either, but there are times that we do. We consider it. But we need to remember, we need to remain in Him. God provided that for us, and we need to remain in Him. We need to make the time. We need to walk with the Lord to listen. Allow Him to prepare us and help us make changes. He wants to give us specific instructions, just as He did to Noah, to equip us, to deliver us, to set us free from whatever we're entangled in, and to sustain us. We have to know who we are in Him and live in alignment with that truth, allowing Him to transform us daily, sometimes even moment by moment. So, what has God spoken to us already? He speaks to all of us. Let me see if for some reason so what has God spoken to us already? He speaks to all of us. And the question is, do we believe what He will do? Do we believe that He will do what He said He would? These are perfect examples, right? Abraham, Moses, Noah. Are we taking the actions to match what we believe? So I have to hear things over and over again. I have a hard time remembering things. Sometimes I could listen to something like 5 times. So I'm a slow learner. So when I shared before, even from the time I've shared before, God continues to say to me, Liz, know me. Know my word. Know me. Know my word. Know who I am. Know who you are in me. He just that just keeps telling me that. So either I'm not getting it, but he is reminding me. Know me. Know my word. Know who I am. So I read that mountains are often the places where God encountered people, where he changed lives, and from where God sent chosen men back down to the world with a prophetic message. Places where God came down and met with his children. Where Jesus, went to be alone, to pray to the Lord, to be with the Lord, to receive and to hear his instruction. He said, I came to do my Father's will, to do his work. So he went to spend time alone with him. It's even a place where Satan tempted Jesus. And what did Jesus do? He showed us how to hold fast to the truth of God's word. Mountains became a place to experience God, and they still are today. So then looking at mountains in a different way. Sometimes, we view them as challenges that we face, looming obstacles in our way that we must overcome. So I started to see when we're facing them, there are also places where we receive instruction, are reminded of our identity and who he is. I am. I started to see as we face those mountains or trying to get over them, God is meeting us there. Not only on the top, but all along the way. On the ascent, during the climb, he's telling us, put your foot there. See that rock? Grab hold there. No, don't go that way. He's coming down to be with us, to meet with us. We meet him, we meet God in our challenges. Just as in today, yesterday, tomorrow, he promises to meet us there. So whether a mountain is a challenge or a mountaintop experience, in either case, it is where God meets us and reveals more of himself to us. Mountaintops are not places for us to seek. And I think that's where I was missing the mark, right? But rather there are moments of revelation where God seeks us out and meets us where we're at. So we've already been to the mountain several times. We've had those experiences. The question or the challenge for myself is, what did he say to me then? We've been on several retreats. And what did he speak to us then? So there I am, searching my notes, looking through all my journals, and it's like, yes, what was he speaking? What he was very specific, right, in the things that he spoke to us. So it's true. What he is telling us every week when we gather together for Bible study, or when we did, when we're listening online to Lenore's teachings, or we're listening to Pastor Charlie giving instruction or teaching, what is God telling us? What is he speaking? When we're praying, when we're pleading out for our children, right? When we're praying for our husbands, for the world, for our leaders, what is God telling us now? What did he reveal to us in those circumstances? Or what is he showing us? He's revealing truths to us about ourselves, about our circumstances, through his word and by his spirit. So, what is he telling us to do? And what is he telling us in this moment? So it's not just in these mountaintop experiences where God is speaking to us. He's speaking to us in the everyday, the here and the now. He's leading us up to those high places. Whether a mountain is a challenge or a mountaintop experience, in either case, it is where God meets us and reveals more of himself to us. So we don't have to drive up a mountain. The same day I was listening to Priscilla Shire, she was sharing that she had watched she was watching the Today Show, and that week they were talking about different religions. And the day that she listened, they happened to be talking about Buddhists, and she thought, well, no, I don't know too much about Buddhists. Let me listen. And what caught her attention and caught mine too is that she said, in their religion or in the Buddhist faith, people would say that they would travel halfway across the world, drive down a winding road for hours to get to the side of a mountain so they could climb up 268 stairs, so they could be standing beside one of 5 Buddhist statues that stands in and around that area. It's like people that subscribe to that faith, that was the goal of at least once in their lifetime to do that. To save enough money to be able to, travel halfway across the world, to drive that winding road for hours, to get to the side of the mountain, to climb up all those stairs, just to go stand next to these statues, right? So they could pray to their God, little g. And what she said next, she says, while they are climbing up to talk to their God, little g, our God, the one true God, is coming down to meet with us. God of the universe, I am. And that's overwhelming to me to think, who am I that my God is coming to meet with me? And he is. Time and time again, as we go through Scripture, we see that he's coming down to meet with us. So we've already been to the mountain. Remember those past retreats. We've met him here. We've met him here, there, instructing us, teaching us, revealing more of himself in his word, delivered through Lenore's teachings. We have to remember, what did he say to us then? What did he reveal to us? What did he tell us to do? And I was even taken back, even before the shelter in place. Where did Lenora lead us? Lenore led us up the mountain with the Beatitude teachings. She did, in preparation. I really believe that. So I encourage you to go back and to listen to that teaching. And then when you're done with that, fast forward to the church, Turn Your Lights On series. Because it's all tied together. So we need to stop waiting for or planning for the mountaintop experience. Moments when everything in life lines up perfectly, or when we're able to retreat far from the distractions of the world, or gather in a building or on a retreat. It's not a one and done. We need to take our learnings, not just the mountaintop experiences, the feelings, the excitement. We need to take the daily interactions with Father, and as Lenore repeatedly has told us, apply these things practice them in every situation. Let's demonstrate in our actions our faith and belief in what he says to be true. So I learned I don't need Google. I don't need to look up geological facts, right? I need to look for the Lord in circumstances and scripture. That's what the Lord's been teaching me, trying to show me, right? To look for him, to look deeper, not just scratching the surface or trying to remember places and circumstances, although all of that is relative and it's important, and it gives even more meaning to what we're reading or learning. But God is saying, again, know me, know my word. And in this present time and circumstances, God is speaking to us. And not only is he warning, he's growing us, right? And he's feeding us. And as he promised to give us shelter and refuge, we just have to know how he's telling us to do it and be obedient in that. Well, that's what I have to share today. And I just feel a little off, but I know that God's word is truth. So it's not me that you're listening to. I just hope that you take this as, oh, this is learning. We're all in a place of learning, and God is speaking to each one of us. And so I just want to end in prayer So, Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you that, great God, that you are coming to meet with us, that you are speaking to us daily in every moment through circumstances. Help us to know you, God. Help us to make the time to be with you. Open our eyes to see and our hearts to receive, God, and our ears to hear you. We thank you and we praise you, Father, for all that you've done and all that you have said that you will do. We give you glory and honor, Lord, in your holy name. Amen.